Recording in progress.
All right, welcome, my friends, to episode 740 of Extreme Health Radio. Thanks for being here today. I've got a bunch of things I want to share with you, mostly about strokes. Been doing a lot of research into strokes, and it's weird because in the last couple of years, I've been getting bombarded with emails about strokes and family members coming down with strokes, and like, what's up with all these people getting strokes, right? Well, I've got a lot to share about that and why people are getting them now and what the conventional reasons are. It's pretty funny when you kind of do the research and you start looking into some of these things. It's just kind of comical what people are saying about strokes. But anyway, it's extremely popular now, and a lot of people are coming down with strokes. And what's up with that, right? Like, why is this happening? And as you know, I love researching. And since I've been getting so many emails about this, I figured, you know what? I think we should do a whole show dedicated to strokes and prevention. So we're going to get into what is a stroke, some stroke stats, what causes strokes, and some of the trends, the risk factors for strokes, the symptoms to look out for. Like, let's say you're out to dinner with a friend and someone says they think they're having a stroke, or you think they're having a stroke, like what to look for, how to prevent strokes, and what to do after a stroke. And then there's a couple good books I want to share with you as well. But suffice it to say that Dr. Milton Packer, medical doctor, wrote an article on medpagetoday.com saying that it's official. This is the title. It's official. Curing patients is bad for business. And so just know that the medical industry is an industry, and they make money when you're sick. And they hope that you do get sick. They want you sick, and they want you to be on drugs. They want to go for long hospital stays. They want you to be getting surgeries. They want you to take chemotherapy, and they want you to take radiation and their pharmaceuticals for the rest of your life until you're dead. And then they'll somehow figure out a way to profit from you after you're dead as well. So just know that. So that's their sort of business model, right? Is you being sick. And so, like I was saying to our Extreme Health Academy members, the biggest act of rebellion that we all can do is to improve our health, is to get healthy. That's the biggest act of rebellion, because not only does it take away from profits from the pharmaceutical industry, but it also opens our minds up, and we're able to think clearly and to see and expose the lies that they're telling us every single day. And it gives us the strength and energy to be able to resist what they're trying to do to us. So the biggest act of rebellion that you could ever do is to get healthy. Improve your health, right? And so I looked up like the stroke industry, like what is it? How much are they making off stroke? So it says here, according to the alliedmarketresearch.com, that the global stroke management market size, it's like the global stroke management market size, it's crazy that it's just crazy they profit from sickness. I mean, it's insane. Anyway, it says here is valued at $31,702,000 in 2020, and is projected to reach $67 million by 2030. So it's going to go up 3 times, or no, double, more than double in less than 10 years. Now, why is that? I wonder why that could be happening. So that should tell you alone right there that there's a correlation between well, I won't say it, but I'll try to keep this thing on YouTube. But I'll get to it in just a second. You probably know what I'm thinking, and I'll get to it in just a second to figure out a way to word it so that I don't get a strike from YouTube. But what actually is a stroke? So a stroke occurs in the body when blood essentially stops flowing to any part of your brain, and what happens is that damages brain cells. And so the effects of a stroke, it depends on the part of the brain that's being damaged and the amount of damage that's done. So it's important to know that it's essentially a heart attack of your brain. And there's a few different types of strokes that people can have. And so that depends on what type you have and what area of the brain was sort of affected. Typically, there's ischemic strokes, and those are caused by a blockage or clot in a blood vessel in the brain. And the blockage can be caused when a substance called plaque builds up inside the wall of an artery. And that essentially is like similar to a heart attack, right? Where they say that your arteries are clogged and you have a heart attack because of plaque buildup. And so what this tells me right here is that there's excess oxidation because there's iron overload and there's a lack of bioavailable copper in the form of ceruloplasmin, right? And this tells me there's inflammation and oxidation all throughout the body. This also tells me that the blood vessels themselves, because of a lack of testosterone and a lack of the building blocks like copper and sulfur and silica and these types of substances, help create strong yet flexible arteries, okay, and blood vessels. So that tells me right there that those two things are happening. So the other kind of stroke is a hemorrhagic stroke, and this is caused when an artery in the brain actually breaks open. And so the interrupted blood flow causes damage to your brain. So the blood is actually coming out of the artery itself. And if you have high blood pressure, for example, this can weaken the arteries, and it's a major cause of these types of hemorrhagic strokes. And there's also a little bit lesser type of stroke called TIA. It's a transient ischemic attack, and it's caused by a smaller sort of blood clot that briefly clogs an artery. And sometimes you have symptoms of these ones, but sometimes you don't. And essentially, this is like, it's warning you that a stroke might be coming. And there are more or less warnings about, a stroke that could be on its way. So essentially, there's the hemorrhagic stroke and the ischemic stroke are the two basic types of stroke. And the lesser is the TIA, the transient ischemic attack. And so, like I mentioned before, with the hemorrhagic stroke, with the break in the artery, this tells me that there's a lack of testosterone, and there's a lack of structural integrity. That is the strength of your connective tissues. And then from the ischemic side of the stroke, that tells me there's oxidation and there's a mineral dysregulation. There's iron overload. There's too much polyunsaturated fatty acids in the diet. There's too much iron in the diet. There's not enough bioavailable copper, and there's not enough retinol. I think it's 13-cis retinoic acid that loads copper into ceruloplasmin, where there's about 6 to 8 copper atoms inside that thing. And inside ceruloplasmin, there's like 24 different enzymes that can express itself. And I think over 1,066 amino acids as well. And it's a very powerful protein called ceruloplasmin. And the only way copper gets into there is through retinoic acid and vitamin A. And so that tells me that with both types of strokes, this is the cool thing about health, is that when you fix mineral dysregulation, you fix everything. You lower your risk of stroke, heart attacks, Alzheimer's, dementia, cancer, heart disease, all of it. Like, it's not like one thing fixes one, potential health challenge and something else fixes something else. You fix the foundation, and everything is fixed. And so that's what I like about strokes. It's a systemic approach. Did I say that's what I like about strokes? That's what I like about health, is that you can fix everything by fixing one thing. So let's get into some stroke stats. So this is interesting. Heart disease and stroke statistic from American Health Journals: 795,000 people experience a new or recurrent stroke. Approximately 610,000 of these are first attacks, and 185,000 are recurrent attacks. And mortality data from 2008 indicate that stroke accounted for 1 out of every 18 deaths in the U.S. I think this was 2012. And on average, every 40 seconds, someone in the U.S. has a stroke. And it says here from 1998 to 2008, so in a 10-year period, the stroke death rate fell 34%, and the actual number of strokes declined. So that's really interesting. So it's interesting because I found this article here all about strokes, and it says some more information. 80% of all strokes result from a blockage or blood clot in a blood vessel or of the brain. 20% of all strokes occur when an artery suddenly bursts. That's that hemorrhagic stroke, and bleeds into the surrounding area of the brain. And immediate treatment can limit or prevent brain damage from stroke. And it says here, stroke is the fifth leading cause of death in the US and the leading cause of serious long-term disability. So it's interesting because when you go on to the normal sort of mainstream websites, it says here what causes a stroke. And it says if you're 40 or over, you have heart disease, high blood pressure or hypertension, smoking, diabetes, high blood cholesterol levels, illegal drug use, recent childbirth, previous mini stroke or TIAs, inactive lifestyle, lack of exercise, obesity, current or past history of blood clots, family history of cardiac disease. And it just kind of goes on. It just gives you some of the just random generic stuff that doesn't really help anybody. But in doing the research, I found some really interesting articles. When you look at, like, for example, for here, high blood pressure is, a cause of strokes, right? So what is that? Well, that's low thyroid. That's excess chemicals in your blood. Heavy metals like iron and cadmium, polyunsaturated fatty acids. These all raise high blood pressure to be higher because we're eating a toxic diet. And so some other interesting information about what could be causing strokes is that there's some studies showing that low levels of vitamin D were associated with lower brain volumes and increased risk of dementia and stroke. And most of you guys know that I am not an advocate of ingesting in pill form vitamin D, because vitamin D could be lots of different things, right? There's a synthesis that occurs when UVB frequency hits your skin and creates 7-dehydrocholesterol. There's a pathway and multiple offshoot pathways that occur when you sulfate cholesterol in a water-soluble form via the sun. But when you take vitamin D, it's actually very damaging to the body for lots of different reasons. And if you're interested in that, you're probably thinking like, dude, my doctor, my medical doctor or my naturopathic doctor, has me on vitamin D. Well, there's more to the vitamin D story. So like Jim Stevenson said, who's been on our show a couple times about vitamin D, like he's not against vitamin D, but we need to know what kind of vitamin D we're talking about, because like there's multiple forms. There's active 25. There's 125 active, and there's 25 OHD storage. But in 25 OHD or 25 OHD storage, there's 14 different types. So which one are we talking about? So it just says low vitamin D levels were associated with lower brain volumes and an increased risk of dementia and stroke. Well, what does that mean, right? Does that mean active? Does that mean storage? But there is a correlation between vitamin D synthesis and stroke. And so what I recommend is, instead of taking vitamin D in pill form, just get it from the sun. If you live in northern climates, consider getting a Sperti vitamin D lamp. We have those on our store, biochargeme.com. We carry those. If you live north of, say, the 33rd parallel, you want to, get a vitamin D lamp, because you get lots more from light than you do one molecule. And that's a whole rabbit trail you can go down. But I would encourage you to get more vitamin D from the sun in the summer and spring months. Make that a priority. Get outside, without sunglasses on, and increase your vitamin D levels. And your body will know how to store it and when to store it, how long to store it, and when to pull it and bring it out of storage when you have issues going on. And your body is intelligently designed to do that. And so, the first thing after reading something like low vitamin D, is shown to, increase the risk of stroke. It says here, in some populations, as much as 17% of dementia cases may be prevented by increasing everyone's normal levels of vitamin D. So, what that says to me is just get out in the sun. Okay. Like, don't pop the pill, get out in the sun. And so that tells me that there is a connection between strokes and vitamin D. And I'll try to put the links to everything I share. This isn't obviously going to be exhaustive, and this is not meant to be something that covers every aspect of strokes. This is meant to just sort of let you guys know there are treatments out there for coming back and preventing further damage from strokes, but it's not meant to be exhaustive. And there's other information out there that you can research, but just know that what they're telling you, there's more to the table. There's more on the table that you can research. But there's a study here that emulsifiers, like those guar gums and carabine gum and locust bean and acacia gum. You know, those thickeners they put in foods and, you know, places like Burger King and McDonald's and Wendy's and places like that, and, you know, processed packaged food. There's a connection between those, endotoxin and strokes. So, and as well as brain tumors too. So look at those things. I'll put a link to the study here, but be very cautious about consuming food that has emulsifiers in them. Okay, where are we at? Okay, so here we have an interesting study about vegans and vegetarians. So I was, for 7 years, I was a raw food vegan. It says here about pescatarians, you know, people that eat fish, were found to have a 13% lower risk of coronary heart disease, which is correlated with strokes, than the meat eaters, while the vegetarians and vegans had a 22% lower risk, but those on plant-based diets had a 20% higher risk of stroke. The researchers suggested that this could be linked to low vitamin B12 levels, but said more studies were needed to investigate the connection. So it's really interesting when you start looking into this. And so if you're a vegan or vegetarian, I would look closely at your diet, and you may want to consider changing that. And here's another study here. It talks about there's a deficiency in vitamin B1. And it says here from specialty medical dialogues.in, the quote, the early analysis of data of an ongoing study by Dr. Mansourian at the Vanderbilt Stallworth Rehabilitation Hospital has revealed that 10% of stroke patients are thiamine deficient and 50% are borderline deficient. So vitamin B1 is a vital vitamin for the development and maintenance of the nervous system, which is affected obviously by stroke. And prior studies have shown that a B1 deficiency is prevalent in people who suffer from alcoholism, gastrointestinal absorption disorders, HIV and AIDS, and genetic deficiency. And it says here there's a high risk of development of symptoms like confusion, peripheral neuropathy, ataxia, numbness, and others from a vitamin B1 deficiency. So you may want to get your B vitamins checked or start including a B vitamin protocol. So whenever it comes to B vitamins, I always recommend, if you're going to do like a standalone, like a B12 shot, or you're going to do like a B12, also sort of back that up with a full spectrum. And the one I like is from Lifeblood. And we have a coupon code if you guys want to try a good B vitamin supplement from Lifeblood. I think it's EHR10. And you can try their B1 or their B supplement, their B complex. That's the one I'm currently on and currently like. But then here is a really interesting study too. Maternal high PUFA diet causes alcoholism, aggressiveness, early puberty, and hyperestrogenism in offsprings. And it says, let's see, it says here, as such, considering the indisputable results from multiple studies on the role of estrogen in causing heart attacks, strokes, and cancer, this is a bidirectional link between PUFA and estrogen. It should give you a pause to most people listening to their doctor that touts the glorious health benefits of unsaturated fats, most of which usually boil down to lowering cholesterol. So this is a PubMed study that you can look at, and it's really interesting because I mentioned PUFAs before, right? Polyunsaturated fatty acids. And those are acids that are fats, lipids that have multiple double bonds that oxidize really easily in the presence of light, heat, and oxygen, which are all contained within our body, right? Our bodies are full of light and full of heat. They're 98.6 degrees, and full of oxygen because that's what we breathe, as well as iron. So all of this oxidation is causing what they call lipid peroxidation. And so it's really important to make sure that you're limiting the amount of polyunsaturated fatty acids that comes in the form of seed oils, fish oils, these types of things that have multiple double bonds and are extremely bad for you. And I don't recommend them to anyone. So the antidote to that is vitamin E, and we'll get to that in just a second. But the other causes are like magnesium deficiency. And here's a study here in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition found that a diet rich in magnesium may reduce the risk of a stroke by 8%. Another study in the Circulation Journal tested the effectiveness of magnesium supplements on patients with heart disease and found that heart disease patients who took magnesium twice a day for 6 months had better physical stamina and healthier blood vessels. So getting on a magnesium protocol, it's funny because it says here, like it may reduce the risk of stroke by 8%. So um, it's just so funny, the wording, right? You can't just come out and say that, it does this. They have to say it might, right? It might help reduce the risk of stroke by only 8%. Well, if you read the book, The Magnesium Miracle by Dr. Carolyn Dean, you'll get a crash course on magnesium that will just blow your mind. And you'll realize that strokes are caused by a magnesium deficiency. And so I recommend having a magnesium protocol. If there's one thing you could do in terms of minerals, is, aside from the ingestion of copper, is magnesium. So make sure that you're getting magnesium every single day. We're woefully deficient in magnesium. As you know, it's required for 3,700 enzymes to work and to function. And all 500 enzymes in our liver require magnesium. It's required for the entire vitamin D synthesis and over 913 genes to express themselves through the nuclear receptor VDR. It's responsible for lowering oxidation and inflammation inside the body. It's responsible for everything. It's responsible for the production of ATP, and it's responsible for like I said, 3,741 or 51 of your 9,000 enzymes. That's 42% of your body requires magnesium to work. You can't convert T4 to T3 in your liver. Most of it happens in your liver to create thyroid hormone without magnesium. You can't detoxify heavy metals without magnesium. It's literally needed for everything. So I recommend everyone get on a magnesium protocol. And that means putting magnesium into your water. So that means, first of all, drinking water. Like, are you drinking enough water? Because that's also another risk factor for stroke. If you don't drink enough water, it's possible that this could happen to you. But you want to make sure you're adding magnesium into your water. And so what I do is I make magnesium bicarbonate, and I take magnesium chloride from Remag. And you can look up REMAG, and you can look up how to make magnesium bicarbonate. And I have videos on that inside the Extreme Health Academy. And I put both those forms of magnesium into my water, along with 5 drops of copper sulfate into my water, along with some other minerals and salt and lemon and stuff like that, for the full spectrum mineral balance there of my water, to make sure I'm getting enough full spectrum minerals. And then I take magnesium from both Lifeblood and MitoLife. So I take those twice a day. And then mostly during the winter months, I'll do more magnesium baths, but you could do magnesium foot baths, and spray. I do spray the magnesium topically as well on my skin. And if you're worried about the absorption, what I found works really well to absorb magnesium better is boron and B6. Boron and B6. I believe boron helps magnesium get inside the cell, and B6 helps it to stay inside the cell. I forget, or it may be the opposite of that, but vitamin B6 and boron, as well as doing the adrenal cocktail, which is super simple. And this is something you could do if you're vegan, carnivore, whatever your diet is. Pro-metabolic, right? All these diets people follow just make me laugh. But you could do the adrenal cocktail twice a day, which is what I do on most days. Sometimes I don't get to it, but it's super simple. So it's coconut water. Make sure there's no iron or vitamin D added to your coconut water. For the potassium, and so you do 4 ounces coconut water, 4 ounces of orange juice, and about 1/4 teaspoon of white sea salt. That's it. You can do that twice a day for that's 8 ounces. You can do 16 ounces of that, or just one and just sip on it throughout the day, and that helps restore your electrolyte balance. It helps restore your adrenal glands to better absorb minerals. It's a great little tonic that anyone can do, especially during the summer months when we're sweating a lot. But then some other causes of stroke, like this is something that you're probably not going to hear that very often, is from a recall healing perspective. And if you guys are unfamiliar with recall healing or the spiritual emotional work, that is a loss of intellectual territory. where a person feels like their ideas are not powerful enough or they're not expressed in a way that can encourage change of someone's outcome. And so think in your life of anyone who's had strokes, and you'll usually find like you could do a timeline therapy, which is really interesting to do. And that means, let's say you're 40 years old and you have a stroke, or you're 80 years old, say, and you have a stroke, right? And if there isn't an emotional issue at that time, you could go down to 40 years old and see if there is something that happened to you when you're 40 years old, or something that happened when you were 20 years old, or something that were, when you were 10 or 5. And usually on one of those times of your life, you'll find that there was an intellectual territory dispute where you felt like your ideas weren't powerful enough to persuade someone to make a change. And so that's something to look for. Just another idea, something that, if you're interested in recall healing, we've done a lot of shows about that. So when I started getting a lot of questions about this, I started looking at trends. I did Google Trends. You could look up on there and see like spikes when people search for things. And there is a lot of stuff. But of course, right? It's people getting the sharp thing, right? So it says here the data from the United States government, the V word, Adverse Event Reporting System, VAERS, VAERS, shows that trying to word this right, shows that a person that received the pokey thing is about 115 times more likely to suffer a stroke compared to someone who didn't get the pokey thing. And it says here, between December of 2020 and the 11th of February 2022, 4,532 cases of people that got the pokey thing and a stroke were logged. So keep in mind that VAERS only captures about 1% of all the pokey thing reactions. And so also the CDC has been caught removing adverse events from there, just so you know. And it says here, comparatively, the number of strokes that occurred as a result of flu shots between 2008 and 2020, a range of 12 to 13 years, is just 122. So what's in these pokey things that's causing this, right? I mean, this is why I'm getting so many emails about this. This is why, like, you look at Google Trends and it just goes spikes. So many people are dealing with this right now. It says here, quote, taking these numbers at face value, you could assume that the C19 pokey things have proven to be 37 times more likely to cause a stroke than the flu pokey thing. And that's from the Daily Expose out of the UK. So people are getting these because they're getting the pokey things, dude. I mean, it's that simple. And, I have a friend who had a stroke before he got the pokey thing, and he got the pokey thing after. And I don't know how he's still alive, to be honest with you. But this is going to be, interesting to watch what happens to people, and to look at the data that comes in from people having strokes. But they say the risk factors, are diabetes, high blood pressure. I mentioned this before: high cholesterol, obesity, atrial fibrillation. I used to have that when I was a kid. I had a hypertrophic cardiomyopathy when I was a kid. But anyway, metabolic syndrome, sleep apnea, low testosterone. And so those are some of the risk factors. But you know what? If you're listening to this and you're on a magnesium protocol and you eat clean, you drink your water, you exercise, you get in the sun, and you don't get the pokey thing, like there's no chance, in my opinion, of you having anything, unless there's some spiritual, emotional trauma, like I mentioned before. But if you're with someone out to dinner, say, for example, or maybe you're eating dinner with someone and you suspect they're having a stroke, and did you know that, I mean, it's like Justin Bieber came out the other day and his wife's wife's name, what's her name? Haley Bieber, like she had a stroke. It's just insane, right? And people like I think he has, on Instagram alone, he has like 220 million followers, and you'll never see anyone like asking if there's a, connection, right? But some of the symptoms to look for, usually there's some kind of numbness or like paralyzation on one side of your body or your face. Or there could be like some confusion, because what's happening is that you're basically having a heart attack in your brain, right? So there's a real trauma that's occurring. a loss of facial function, slurred speech, trouble walking, these types of things. And you could have someone repeat words that you're saying, and if they slur their speech, maybe, or you could hold one of their arms up and see, hold both arms up and see if one of them goes down. You can see if they have any confusion or a side of their face is droopy or something. It's very possible that person could be having a stroke. So just look out for that if you're with someone. But some things I want to get to are prevention and remedies. What to do if someone has a stroke? Like what to do if you have one, right? So you have like a 3 to 4 hour window after you have a stroke of doing something very beneficial for you. But before we get into that, let's get into prevention a little bit. And like I mentioned before, mineral dysregulation is going to be number one on the list, right? So that means high iron in the body, stored in the tissues. You may show up as low ferritin in your blood, which is normal, specifically because I think it's about 10-to-1 ratio of iron stored in your glands and organs versus in your blood. So, if you have, if your ferritin is 1, for example, it's 10 in your organs. So it's 10 times the amount. And so what happens is that when that gets stored in your organs and your soft tissues and your arteries and your blood vessels in your brain, all over the body, in the liver, in your organs, your thyroid, all of that, it oxidizes when it's exposed to oxygen, which we breathe, right? So that's called the Fenton reaction, and that occurs when there's a loss of electrons and there's massive oxidative damage and oxidative stress that occurs, and an electron loss occurs. And that's why we have to constantly be consuming, antioxidants. But the biggest antioxidant is blood donation, right? So people who donated blood regularly, it says here, had a 45% less chance of a heart attack and stroke. So this was a Finnish experiment that they did. They did one in America and one in Finland. And in Finland, it was a 9-year study. And I forget how many people, there's like 2,300 people, I think, that were part of this experiment. And in Finland, it was 88% less chance of a heart attack or stroke by people who donated blood. So this is really interesting, guys. So one of the best things you can do is to donate blood, which I did yesterday. So donating blood is really, really helpful. And the reason why is because you can get rid of roughly 250 milligrams of iron per donation. And the donation itself it takes me about 6 minutes. I bleed really quick, or I don't know if I bleed quick, but the blood comes out of me quick. Probably because I usually have a big meal right before, I take my supplements right before, I drink a lot of water right before, and I'm relatively healthy, very healthy, and so it takes me about 6-7 minutes to donate 250 milligrams of iron in the blood that I donate, and you can do this every 2 months. And so blood donation is a great way to reduce your risk of having a heart attack or a stroke. Okay. And it says here, there's another study, consequently, again, in Finland. This was a 26-year study. There was a 75 to 85% decrease in strokes over a 26-year period. This is crazy. And I got this from Dr. Jonathan Wright, and he read the study, and it was because they introduced a salt that contained potassium, magnesium, L-lysine hydrochloride. So this is really fascinating. So, most of the time you're going to see people say that salt causes strokes. Well, what about this 26-year Finnish study where there's a 75 to 85% decrease in strokes over a 26-year period? This is fascinating information, right? I mean, wouldn't you think that it would behoove our health officials to adopt what they did to their salt? Now, in this study in Finland, it was the only salt that was available. And I forget the years that this study took place, but I think it was in the 70s and 80s primarily. But it's fascinating, right? You would think 75 to 85% decrease in stroke because the salt contained potassium, magnesium, and L-lysine. And that's what I'm saying. that it's mineral dysregulation. So there's a lack of bioavailable copper, like I mentioned before. Selenium plays a role, and potassium as well, but magnesium as well, and an excess amount of iron and polyunsaturated fatty acids. So it says here in regards to copper, from a study I'm reading here, disturbances in copper homeostasis lead to impaired neuronal function and neurological diseases, including Alzheimer's disease, Wilson's disease, and more. Recent observation has suggested that zinc deficiency might contribute to the accumulation of senescent cells and to vascular pathology, as well as ischemic strokes. So again, this is one of the reasons why I like to always make sure that, for me personally, I know there's a lot of debate about this, but I like to include vitamin A, retinol, so that that copper can be bound correctly to that key protein. Because if it's not, copper becomes unbound in the blood, and it's a highly reactive metal, right? As is iron and aluminum and these types of things, right? So the copper needs to be utilized in this protein called ceruloplasmin. And it's my understanding that 13-cis-retinoic acid, like I mentioned before, is the only substance that will allow the copper to be loaded there into that key protein. Otherwise, it's my understanding it can be bound to like albumin and transcuprin and these different copper enzymes in different parts of the body. And that's why when you get an HTMA, they say you're copper toxic. Well, it's not really that copper's like you're toxic. It's that it's not, it's like the old game of musical chairs. There's too many people and not enough chairs, right? And so, there's one person left standing where everyone's supposed to be sitting in chairs. In this case, copper is supposed to be inside that protein, because that protein can manifest itself 24 different ways, 24 different enzymes, and 1,066 amino acids. And so, like, for example, the ceruloplasmin, I think it's ferroxidase enzyme that is a result of copper being loaded into ceruloplasmin, is responsible for the opening of ferroportin that allows iron to get out of the cell. Essentially, it's copper, but it's ferroxidase via ceruloplasmin, via copper, via 13-cis-retinoic acid. And so make sure you're consuming retinoic acid, vitamin A with your copper. But that's interesting, right? As well as the zinc. I thought that was really interesting as well. And then here from the same study, it talks about selenium, and it says it is an essential mineral that is critically involved in immunogenic, anti-carcinogenic, that's anti-cancer, anti-mutagenic processes, including cell proliferation control and anti-aging activities. Selenium and many selenoproteins as components of the antioxidant systems may exhibit neuroprotective properties. The up-to-date human data have suggested that stroke is connected with considerably decreased selenium levels. Thus, some studies have indicated that the importance of preventing selenium deficiencies in patients with risk factors for cardiovascular diseases, including ischemic strokes. So, if you're familiar with our show, we did a whole show. I mean, selenium is one of those minerals that's so important, right? It's like copper. It's like, vitamin A is not a mineral, but it's a vitamin. Magnesium, iron, in terms of the damaging effects of iron, they're very important, right? And so same as, potassium and sodium as well. But we did an entire show about a guy reversing a friend's cancer using just selenium. It's a whole selenium protocol. If you go to extremehealthradio.com/2, you can listen to that, and it's a fascinating thing. And here's an article from Dr. Ray Peat I thought was interesting on aspirin. It says here, the recognized anti-metastatic effect of aspirin and its ability to inhibit the development of new blood vessels that would support the tumor's growth make it an appropriate drug to use for pain control, even if it doesn't shrink the tumor. So he's talking about tumors and stuff here. In studies of many kinds of tumors, though, it does cause regression or at least slow tumor growth. And it protects against many of the systemic consequences of cancer, including wasting, cachexia, immunosuppression, and strokes. So you may want to consider for the prevention of strokes, if you're worried about that. Maybe you've had one and you don't want to have another one, getting on an aspirin protocol. And I forgot the name of the aspirin that I have. What is it? Oh, if it comes to me, I'll say, because a lot of aspirin has, other excipients and weird stuff in it. You want to just get something that's just aspirin. But another way, if you've had a stroke or you want to prevent a stroke, is dehydration. Drinking enough water, keeping your blood viscous and clean. So, drinking enough water is, in my opinion, extremely important, especially in the winter months because you're dry, and in the summer months you sweat. So, I like to drink 3 mason jars. I'm about 185. So, I drink about 3 mason jars full of water a day, and I add copper sulfate to it, magnesium, multiple forms, some sea salt, some Utah sea minerals, some whole food vitamin C, some lemon juice, a little bit of apple cider vinegar, and I make a little concoction of water, some methylene blue from Lifeblood. I'll put a little bit of that in there, and it tastes really good. And I drink 3 of those every day. I drink one full one right when I wake up, along with my systemic enzymes that I'll talk about in just a second. And then I'll drink the other 2 up until dinner. I'll just sip on them throughout the day. So making sure you're drinking enough water, that's very important. And sauna therapy. In my opinion, we have the best sauna. I love our sauna. It's the Relax Far Infrared sauna we have on our store, biochargeme.com. But it says here, frequent sauna bathing, this is from Science Daily, is associated with a reduced risk of stroke. According to a new international study, in a 15-year follow-up study, people taking a sauna 4 to 7 times per week were 61% less likely to suffer a stroke than those taking a sauna once a week. This is the first prospective large-scale study on this topic, and the findings were reported in Neurology. So there you go, sauna therapy. Gosh, 4 to 7 times a week. Man, we have twin boys. There's no way I could do that. I do it. Let's see. I do it. Well, my goal is 4 times a week. I usually get twice if I'm lucky. But I used to do it like probably 6 days a week for, 8, 9 years. Then we had twins, and then then I can't do it as much. The other thing I would do, and I don't have studies for this, but I would get on a vitamin E protocol. I like the vitamin E from MitoLife. It's my favorite because it is a chain-breaking antioxidant. So anytime you have, cholesterol that's oxidizing, that's because of the Fenton reaction, excess iron and polyunsaturated fatty acids, heavy metals, and estrogen combining synergistically to create oxidation inside the body. And vitamin E is a chain-breaking antioxidant. It also helps counteract excess estrogen, which is also implicated in the thinning of blood vessels. And so vitamin E is really a big one. And the one I like and I take the most often is MitoLife's PUFA Protect. That one is the best one. And vitamin K as well, because vitamin K, we did a whole show on vitamin K with Kate Rayon Blue and her book. I think it's something vitamin K2 paradox or something. But essentially what that does, it does a lot of things. It helps create energy, helps to reduce oxidation, create ATP and complex 4. It also helps to deliver calcium where it needs to be and takes calcium away from where it shouldn't be. Vitamin K is awesome. And that, again, I get from MitoLife as well. And I take 2 of those a day. But other things you can take too are garlic and hawthorn. Exercising is going to keep your blood viscous. It's going to keep your blood moving. It's going to increase circulation. And then if you do any research on this too, you're going to always see fish oil for the prevention of strokes. And the reason is because fish oil can thin your blood, but it also is highly reactive to heat and light inside the body and temperature as well. So I don't recommend fish oil, but it does have a metabolic effect, just like taking vitamin D does, just like taking melatonin does. These things do have an effect on the body, just like chemotherapy does, right? Radiation as well. Like these things work and they kill cancer cells, right? But they also kill you in the process. So fish oil does thin your blood, and you will see a good benefit for about 60 days, 60 to 90 days. But then after that, things start going south. So, if I were going to have surgery, I may take some fish oil, but probably what I would do is take cod liver oil. I don't take it now, and I don't really recommend it, but it's my understanding that it's a full spectrum polyunsaturated fatty acid, and it would be much more like if you were to, it would be much safer for you to do cod liver oil and vitamin E than it would be to just take fish oil for multiple reasons. But if you're if you're willing to do that, I would do the cod liver oil and take the vitamin E in place of fish oils, because that will have the same effect, and deal with the oxidative damage that occurs with that. And if you're concerned about, maybe you've had a stroke and you obviously want to prevent another one, there's tests that you can get, like, a blood viscosity test. And that just essentially tests the thickness of your blood. And you can go to any doctor and get that blood test, or you can get like a platelet aggregation test. And that essentially just like tests the viscosity or slipperiness, for lack of a better word, of the platelets in your blood. And so that one's called a platelet aggregation test. And you can get those tests. And, let's say you've been, had a stroke and you just want to make sure, stay on top of things. But if you're following all those recommendations, I wouldn't worry too much. But what do you do if you've had a stroke, right? So you have like a 3 to 4 hour window, really, before, that you can really do some good things. And so I don't have studies for all of this, but I will tell you what I would do. And this is kind of difficult because you have to have access to, procedures and things like this. But in an ideal world, if you can just snap your fingers and make these things happen, here's what I would do. Let's say someone suffered a catastrophic. Let's say I suffered a catastrophic stroke, right? So the first thing you're going to want to do is sort of artificially force oxygen into your brain. And so that's where hyperbaric oxygen can reverse this damage. So usually what happens is that there's that event that occurs in your brain, right? The heart attack in your brain, and that causes damage inside your brain, most notably to the nerve cells in your brain and your nervous system there. And, when this happens within a 3 to 4 hour window, around 90% of those nerve cells, they're dormant. They're not dead. They've just been damaged. So think of it like, like if you watch a UFC fight or a boxing match, right? And someone goes down for the count, they get knocked out. They're on the ground, but they're not dead, right? They're dormant. And so these things can be revived. So in the same way that you would count to 10 in a boxing match, you can do that with hyperbaric oxygen, and you could literally revive the nerve cells in your brain by doing hyperbaric oxygen, but you have to do it within about 3 to 4 hours. So, this is hard because, if you are in the middle of nowhere, or you're on an airline flight or something like that, you're in some situation where you can't just, you don't have your home, hyperbaric oxygen chamber, and you don't have the stroke while you're sitting right next to it, right? Because you're living your life, then it's difficult. There can be difficult. Or, you could get access to like, acam.org, acam.org, and look for a practitioner in your area. But that's what I would do anyway. I would look for a practitioner in your area. Go to acam.org and go to find a doctor, and know where these people are in your area, so that in the case something happens, you can call one of them up and get access to one of their hyperbaric oxygen chambers. My friend Matt Blackburn has his own hyperbaric oxygen chamber in his house, which you can get. Of course he does, right? If you haven't followed Matt on Instagram, he's hilarious. He's great. He posts the funniest memes, but not memes, but stories in his Instagram stories. He's great. He's got a great podcast too, which I highly recommend. It's one of my favorite, called Mito Life Radio, and go check that out. But he's got a hyperbaric oxygen chamber in his house, and you can buy it. I mean, they're thousands of dollars, but if you have the excess money, I would definitely get one, just to have on hand. So the other thing that you could do too is key enzymes. And these are enzymes that I take preventatively. Again, they're from Mito Life, my friend Matt. And we have a coupon code. I think it's EHR15 for his product called Dissolvidol. And that's a systemic pancreatic enzyme called, it uses nattokinase and serrapeptase. And so roughly about 2/3 of strokes are clot strokes, and 1/3 of strokes are those ischemic strokes that are caused when the blood vessel bursts open. And this happens and this is basically causes bleeding in your brain. And that's where you literally just need to go probably get some kind of surgery to get that blood vessel close so you don't continue to bleed in your brain. But if it's a clot stroke, you can take serrapeptase and nattokinase right away. And sometimes you can go to a doctor. And this is what's crazy. You can go to a doctor and or a hospital, and if it's a clot stroke, they'll do a test and they'll find out what kind of stroke it is, and they can actually literally do nattokinase in an IV, which is crazy, and that would be amazing. But again, if it's one of the 1/3 of the strokes that's from excess bleeding, it may need to be operated on because that blood vessel essentially just burst inside your brain. So it's important to know what kind of stroke you had in order to, know whether or not to do the nattokinase and serrapeptase. But I take those every morning, and I recommend you do that too. Like, those enzymes are so powerful. My goodness. And there is a doctor who wrote a book, I'll tell you in a minute, who makes this connection between fibrinogen and strokes, and he's written a whole book about it. And I'll tell you the title of that later on. But essentially, nattokinase and serrapeptase, this product Dissolvedol, eats up fibrin and fibrinogen inside your body, and necrotic debris, fungus, things in your blood that shouldn't be there. It acts like Pac-Man. That's why I take those on an empty stomach from MitoLife every day. And so I take about 3 or 4 before bed and 3 or 4 in the morning with the water I drink. And, that literally goes throughout my body all night long and just dissolves and eats up things in my blood that shouldn't be there. So that's important to do for prevention. And that product is called Dissolvedol. And our code EHR15 will get you 15% off of that one if you're interested in doing that as a preventative. But it also helps spare your pancreas. It helps lower inflammation, cuts down on scar tissue. It's amazing. It's amazing. So anyway, something else you could do too is carry around with you cayenne and garlic, right? But see, here's the thing. If you have a stroke, you don't know if it's that ischemic kind. So, thinning your blood, may not be a good idea if you have, a burst in your blood vessel in your brain, right? So, but carrying around cayenne and garlic would be incredible for, having a heart attack. And there's a famous herbalist, Dr. Richard Schultz, back in the day, would save lives by, I remember him, stories about him sharing where, he'd be in a parking lot where someone would have a heart attack, and he would immediately give them cayenne and garlic, and it would reverse. And it's amazing what these herbs can do if you carry them around with you. Maybe, carry a bottle. You can buy those in capsules and just, take them if you need them. But here's something really interesting, too, in my research on this, from a Dr. Stanley Abrams. And he was saying, I think he's out of the University of Oregon, I believe. But he was mentioning there's some articles written up about him about doing an IV DMSO treatment can reverse the damage of a stroke in an hour. If you're able to get this treatment within an hour of getting, the event, the stroke, you can actually get a DMSO IV. So that's why it's really important to go to acam.org and find a place in your area that you can call on and maybe make friends with the owners of that business or whatever you have to do, and, become friends with them and say, hey, you know what, can I call you? Can I get your personal number? If something happens, are we able to contact you and come in for a, IV DMSO treatment or a magnesium IV? A lot of studies on that, reversing stroke damage as well. So, just having friends like this would be really, really powerful. But again, if you could donate blood, I doubt you could donate blood. But if you know someone who is a phlebotomist, for example, donating blood right after a stroke might be helpful. And if you research ozone and UBI, ultraviolet blood irradiation therapy in ozone IV, that would be really helpful. If you had your home, a home ozone machine, you could do a rectal insufflation. And it's my understanding that a rectal insufflation of ozone is about 97% as effective as IV ozone. So that would be something that I would do. Or you can also, I think you can get home UBI treatments too. So this is what I'm talking about. This is what I always mention on my show. Turn your home into a healing center. Invest in one of those saunas. Get a rebounder so that you can, stimulate your lymphatic fluid. Get a Rife machine. Get a molecular hydrogen device like I have. Get hyperbaric oxygen. If you have a lot of money, get into hyperbaric oxygen. Bring these tools into your home and turn your home into a healing center, so that if things happen, you can treat yourself at home. Right? You go right in. You could do a rectal insulfation of ozone. You could do a magnesium IV if you're able to do that. So these are all things that you can consider, right? If you have these tools at home, or at the very least, go to acam.org and befriend a place that will administer these treatments for you. From a homeopathic level, you could get one for the nerves called Nervinum. And it's my understanding that from past guests on our shows that we've done a number of shows on homeopathic remedies, and Nervinum is, you can go up and down in potency in that one, but that's going to be essentially help heal the nerves that get damaged when you have a stroke. And or you could do B vitamins and B12 shots. Those have shown lots of studies showing that those are really great, as well as St. John's wort. You could look into chelation therapy, but chelation like EDTA and oxidative stress relief by Boyd Daly, or what's his name? I forget his name, is something like that. Boyd Haley, I think. These types of treatments, essentially disrupt the relationship of copper and iron inside the body. So you're pulling good minerals out with chelation therapy. But, if you're on death's door, if you've had a catastrophic stroke and you're able to do chelation therapy, that would be something that would be on the table. Because, here's the thing, when it comes to catastrophic events, everything you do as a lifestyle, as a preventative, that sort of goes out the window, right? And something may be damaging if you take it ongoing, like fish oil. For example, it's my understanding that after like 60 to 90 days, you start having reverse effects of fish oil. But if you're going to have a surgery, or if you've had a stroke, and all you have at home is fish oil, it might be worth taking for a couple of days. You're not going to do any damage. And, understanding how the body works, and you can mitigate that damage through taking vitamin E, copper and retinol and magnesium, and getting back onto that protocol would help. But, taking fish oil for a couple of days, if you've got a life-threatening situation going on, it would be on the table for me. So a couple of books that I recommend is one called Hidden Causes of Heart Attacks and Strokes. And I'll put a link to it as well. And that's that book that I was mentioning about fibrinogen. And it says here, fibrinogen is a glycoprotein complex. It's produced in the liver that circulates in the blood of all vertebrates. And during tissue and vascular injury, it is converted enzymatically by thrombin to fibrin, and then to a fibrin-based blood clot. Fibrin clots function primarily to occlude blood vessels to stop bleeding. So this is where he's putting the connection together of excess fibrinogen in the body and heart attacks and strokes. So the other book is The Origin of Atherosclerosis, What Really Initiates the Inflammatory Process. That's a good book to read on the subject. And so in closing, just know that they don't want you to not get strokes. They want you sick, and they want everyone getting strokes. That's what they want. They want you sick, and they want to make as much money off you as possible. And the biggest act of rebellion is going to be getting healthy and getting off pharmaceutical drugs, taking care of and ownership of your health, and not needing any of whatever it is they're trying to offer you, whether it's a pokey thing or whether it's some pharmaceutical drug, right? So the biggest act of rebellion, if you really want to see change in the world, get off the drugs. Because listen, if you're able to get off the drugs, if everyone in the world could get off of the drugs, the pharmaceutical companies would crash overnight. But we become dependent upon them and beholden to them for our health. And that's because our society has taught us to outsource our health to guys in white lab coats. And it's really important to take full ownership and control. So do all of the things that I mentioned. Start doing regular blood donations. Get out in the sun, right? Cleanse the body of chemicals and heavy metals like cadmium and iron, right? Make sure your thyroid is working properly. Get out in the sun to make sure you're getting enough vitamin D. Make sure that you're regulating your hormones, because weak blood vessels is a result of low testosterone. Make sure you're avoiding emulsifiers in your foods and you're eating a clean diet. ideally not vegetarian or vegan, and make sure that you're not B1 deficient or B vitamin deficient. Make sure you don't have excess estrogen production and excess estrogen exposure through plastics and other things like that. Make sure you're limiting polyunsaturated fatty acids. Make sure you're increasing magnesium and the adrenal cocktail and potassium and selenium, right? And make sure that you're getting enough copper. We did a whole show with Jason Hommel on copper that will fascinate you. And for 3 cents a month, for a $10 bag that will last you for 20 years, you can make a copper sulfate pentahydrate, where 1 drop in a 2-ounce bottle, 1 drop will equal 1 milligram of copper. And it will last you months and months and months. And this is your medicine. Okay. And also make sure you're taking your selenium and you're on a magnesium protocol that I mentioned before. Because like I said, magnesium runs 3,751 of your 9,000 enzymes. You can't detoxify without it. You can't make energy without it. And you can't mitigate the damaging effects of oxidation without it. Make sure you're drinking enough water. You're doing sauna therapy. You're on vitamin E. You're on vitamin K from MitoLife. If you want to, if you feel need to, do the fish oil, but instead of fish oil, do the cod liver oil combined with vitamin E from MitoLife, so that you're mitigating whatever damage that could be caused from the polyunsaturated fatty acids. And make sure you're exercising. Make sure, get out in the sun, do some exercise. If you watch our Instagram stories, you see 3 or 4 times a week I'm out there doing my workouts, stuff like that. And then in closing, remedies, what to do right after a stroke. If you can, hyperbaric oxygen, number 1 thing you can do, right? Because some of the other things like nattokinase and serrapeptase, kind of difficult to do. But if you're able to get like a DMSO IV or an ozone IV or a magnesium IV, all 3 of which would be beneficial, or ultraviolet blood irradiation therapy right after a stroke, that would be extremely, extremely beneficial for you. And so getting on the Dissolve-It-All from MitoLife, which is a combination of nattokinase and serrapeptase, helps to decrease the risk of strokes because it essentially eats up blood clots. And so getting on that on a regular basis, like I mentioned before, I take 3 or 4 before bed and 3 or 4 in the morning. And then there's B12, B vitamins, the homeopathic, Nervinum, ginkgo biloba, hawthorn, garlic. These types of things are really great for thinning the blood. But those are all things. And make sure you're getting enough fat-soluble vitamins too. If you want to go even further, you can read those books, Hidden Causes of Heart Attack and Stroke and the Origin of Atherosclerosis, what really initiates the inflammatory process. So that was at episode 740. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you want to support the show, you can buy any of the products that I mentioned on MitoLife. And use our code EHR15. And the ones that I mentioned here in this show would be the Dissolve-It-All, which is the nattokinase serrapeptase, the vitamin E, and the vitamin K. Those would be the ones that you would want to get on. And then if you want to purchase any of the products at Lifeblood, the methylene blue of his products are just amazing because they're in liquid form. And so you can give them to your kids. But he's got the methylene blue there too, which we did an entire show on methylene blue. And that would be also a part of my strategy as well after if I ever did have a stroke. But so the Lifeblood, you can purchase the products on there. And I'll put links to those on today's show page. And I'll do my best to link up these studies. It's kind of difficult to do, but I'll put many of them there. And I'm sorry I didn't have more studies. It just would have taken me too long to come up with all the studies. But those are some things that I would do. And again, this isn't exhaustive. This isn't meant to be the end all be all, but it's just some things that I would do, if I had a stroke or whatever. So I hope that helps you. If you know of anyone that has a stroke or that wants to prevent one, or maybe strokes run in someone's family, or maybe whatever the case may be, send this to them. And hopefully some of the ideas shared here will help. And what else? Yeah. So if you want to support the show, you can go to our store, biochargeme.com, and that's where all of our recommended products are. And we link off to Lifeblood. We link off to MitoLife. We have the sauna there that I mentioned, the rebounder. We have a ton of different things on biochargeme.com, and that's how you can support the show that we do. Anytime you're in the market to buy something, a supplement, or maybe a tool like a Rife machine or an ozone machine or molecular hydrogen device, whatever the case may be. We carry them all there on biochargeme.com. And what else? Oh, if you purchase on Amazon, we have a link on our bio on Instagram and our homepage, extremehealthradio.com. And there's a link there, and that helps support us. So, I'm sure many of you shop there. And if you do, nothing changes on your end. All you got to do is click the link, and we can't see what you buy, but we'll get a little commission for your order. And you can do that anytime you order on Amazon. And it's a great way to support the show because, gosh, and I think the benefit too is that, a little bit of money, is taken away from Jeff Bezos, because I don't think he needs all that money anyway. So, nothing wrong with making it, but, if you can support our show with your Amazon purchases, that would be awesome. I would appreciate that. And just send this show to your friends, follow us on Instagram, tag us in posts. That would be great. And get the word out there. You can write a review. I would really appreciate that. That would be awesome. But those are all the different ways to support us. And if you want to take your health even further, we have an Extreme Health Academy where we go into the details of how to do all these things and protocols and stuff like that. I'm live every Friday morning there from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. Pacific. And Dr. Bergman is live on the third Sunday of each month. And we have courses, we have workshops, and all kinds of cool stuff, as well as a forum in there too. And I'm in there helping answer questions and linking to products and, all that kind of good stuff. So if you want to do that, and in the future, I'm also going to be doing one-on-ones, I think. So I'm going to be available for health coaching, health advice, and tips. I'm not sure what I'm going to charge for that, but I'm going to be doing it on a limited basis because I just feel like it would be very rewarding to do that. And it would be nice to see people's progress and stuff like that. So I'll be doing that on a limited basis, probably in the next 6 months or so. But anyway, hope you enjoyed the show. Share it with a friend. I would appreciate it. And we'll see you guys on the next episode. And to get all the links, remember, just go to extremehealthradio.com/740.